Welcome. I've got Billy here with me today. Billy is the lead pastor at Wellspring Church. Thanks for being here, Billy.
Thank you for inviting me. This is a joy.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'd love to start the conversation today just by hearing a little bit more about your organization. What do you do? Who do you serve? And maybe talk to us a little bit about what the world looked like before you sort of started down this path of engaging a fractional leader, or as we like to call them, co-builder.
Yeah, thank you, Joshua. Yeah, my name is Billy Waters. I'm lead pastor of Wellspring. I also serve as the overseer, what we call a canon for church planting for our diocese, which is just a fancy phrase for overseeing approximately 40 churches within our particular denomination.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, how did you get to a point where you looked at sort of what was going on in your organization and across the different responsibilities that you had, and ultimately got to a world where you were like, I think I need some help here?
Yeah. Well, pastoral ministry is interesting in the sense that it's not just reactive and it's not just proactive. It's a mixture of the day-to-day of reacting to certain crises, whether it's, funerals that have come up or situations that arise, just natural crises. But then there's also kind of the week-to-week planning of whether it's sermons or sermon series, because we have a due date every Sunday. We have to present something every Sunday. So that's kind of more of the reactive, but then also a sense of like, we understand what we can expect on a week-to-week basis. The thing that is more proactive is as a ministry leader, as an organizational leader of a church, trying to figure out how to cast vision over the next year to 3 years to the next 10 years. And in that process, putting together strategies and objectives as a church and bringing those two things together of being proactive about the future, but then also recognizing that in pastoral ministry, we have to react to the need crises of our community. It both present kind of like this push-pull dynamic. And as a result, there's certain things that we know that we need in terms of hires, in terms of what the organization and church needs in regards to our vision. But then there's also some things that are unclear. Like as we put forward a vision for the future, we don't know exactly 100% this is the kind of employee, the kind of profile that we need as a church. And so therefore it presented with us an opportunity to look at this concept of fractional leadership.
How big is your organization?
The church is what we call ASA, or average Sunday attendance, is about 1,000, but within the diocese, the broader region, there's 40 churches, and then our denomination itself is about 100,000 people. But I oversee church planting for approximately 40.
And what does that look like for a staff perspective for you?
For staff, that means that we have, I'm not sure what the FT or the full-time equivalent is, but we have approximately 25 staff. And then in addition to that, we have some apprentices, interns, and residents. So anywhere from about, I would say 32 to 35 total employees for our specific organization.
It's great. Yeah. And I mean, FTEs are great to always do the equivalent, but at the end of the day, as a leader, right? I mean, whether it's a full-time or even a part-time, I mean, there is some level of care, right? That regardless of the number of hours that still goes into that. So when you think about sort of that arc, you mentioned sort of the two different contrasting pulls that you have on your time. How did that start to show up that you really got to the point where you were like, I can't keep doing this, or I need to do something different? Was there some sort of feeling? Were you seeing that showing up somewhere in terms of how execution was happening, or walk me through that?
Yeah, I would say the biggest pinch point for us, or the tension, is that as we were looking back 10 years ago, and the number of occupational pastors and people that were wanting to enter into the ministry, 10 years ago, that pipeline was flowing. We had a lot of just A-type leaders, just quantity and quality across the board. And so when there was a need that arose, it felt like we had people within the pipeline that we could begin to pull from. And it was great because within our internship program, they were already getting a taste of our culture. So it wasn't like we would have to hire somebody from the outside and then take 12 months to be able to allow them to acclimate to our culture. They were a part of our system. And it was more of a seamless process. And when we planted churches, we had a pipeline. the tension began to arise over the past, I would say, 5 or 7 years, where that quality and quantity of leader began to decrease, and so it was increasingly more challenging to hire new people, find new people that would fit our organization, fit our culture, fit our identity. And so we really had to wrestle through, like, what did it look like for us as a church, and then also as an organization, to raise up next generation occupational pastors, leaders. That was the need of the hour for us,
Yep.
because the ministry didn't like decrease. The needs didn't decrease. Crises didn't decrease. Like, things are always up, and it just felt like it was just more and more busy, more and more pressures, more and more needs. And the pipeline that we could pull from of employees, of leaders that we could raise up to meet those needs was becoming less and less.
Yeah. And so you had this sort of clear defined need, right? It sounds like that was sort of encompassing. And it also, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sort of sounds like there was also this other added realization of tension that I've got all these other things that I also need to do. And now I have this thing. So how in the world are we going to do that? We all have a sort of constrained number of hours and things that we can do things in. So at the end of the day, finding that capacity to now do this really important task that, quite candidly, especially when you think about the church planting arm of this, and church oversight portion of this, of raising up that sort of next generation of pastors to sort of be able to step into those roles without that pipeline. I mean, I imagine that makes things significantly more difficult.
Yeah, yeah, and that was the pinch point. And we were trying to find, and it wasn't just even full-time people. It was people like that could step
Mm.
in part-time, people that could fulfill both. And it wasn't just us. It was, I mean, as the one that's responsible for church planting, I was getting calls, and I still get calls on a week-to-week basis, of people that are needing music leaders, children's pastors, youth
Mm.
pastors,
Yep.
church planters. I mean, the vacuum is across the board. And as I talk to other denominational leaders, they're experiencing the same thing. In fact, I was listening to one podcast, and the person was saying, who does church consultation, was saying the number one complaint from churches is they just don't have next generation leaders, like pastors that are in the pipeline that could just step up. And as a result, it's not only leaving a vacuum in current ministry, but it's also leaving a vacuum in future ministry with succession planning. So I would say this is the need of the hour that we were facing. And it came up really in light of what you were just mentioning. It was surfacing when the pressures of the ministry were bearing down, and we didn't have anybody on the bench. Like, it's
Yeah.
not like we
No
had a
relief
bench.
valve.
We didn't have anybody on the bench to pull from when a player was hurt, or we needed to, find somebody else. There wasn't very many people there.
Yeah. So as you sort of looked at that problem, how did you talk me through your sort of your problem solving method, and sort of as you looked at that, what options did you consider? What did you think about doing? And how did you ultimately land on sort of this idea of bringing in somebody fractionally to sort of help do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, this was about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, and I was wrestling with the issue, the problem, and honestly, I did not know what to do. Explored a bunch of different options in terms of, like, how do we raise up next generation pastors? Looked at a model, actually, the church during World War II, like, how did they,
Mm,
during Nazi Germany, like, how did
yep.
Bonhoeffer raise up future leaders in the midst of, like, an incredibly oppressive empire? Like, what did he do that was so compelling and that raised up just like these fervent pastors? Looked at some other residential models, and quite honestly, it was frustrating because what I had was a full plate of, like, what I mentioned before, reacting and trying to be proactive in ministry. All the while, I have this glaring need, and I wasn't sure, like, what was the value proposition? What is the problem that I'm trying to solve? And what is the appropriate solution for the real problem? And I didn't have time to do both. And I knew that it was a significant issue. So I put together a task force from members within our church and said, here's the problem that I'm facing, and I need some people to help me think through this. And we met for probably, I don't know, over the course of 3 to 4 months. And there was a member in there, Jeff Hainan, who believes deeply in fractional leadership, obviously, and that's the vision for what you're doing. He said, I know something about building organizations. And so what I would like to do is make myself available. And as he shared what a fractional leader could do for solving this particular issue, I thought, that's exactly what we need, because we wouldn't have to like hire another full-time employee to figure this out, because we didn't know what we're trying to figure out. But it was more than a consultant, because a consultant would have a voice, but no like teeth to what they were doing. And so that the thought of bringing in a fractional leader who could be able to get clear on the problem and then present a compelling solution was super motivating for me. And so then he went to work right away. And looking back, that was the best decision that I made over the past 4 years or 3 years, is to bring him on as a fractional leader.
I have two follow-up questions for you on that. I think the first is, how did the problem that you were facing and that tension show up, right? So you've got the pastoral care piece, this sort of shepherding piece that you're trying to do within your own sort of congregation, but then you also have this sort of church planting arm and responsibility, and now you've got this shortage of leaders, and you sort of look at those problems. Was that like a problem that you're like, this is really important, but it's not an area that it's not the area that I want to go do. It's not the area that I feel as sort of where the Lord has gifted me to go do. And man, I should really be spending my time over here. How did that sort of walk me through that a little bit? I'd like to unpack
Yeah.
that.
Well, if you or your listeners know anything about Working Genius, I live in the wonder area. So I love to dream and wonder about like what could be. And I am a visionary in that sense, and also a galvanizer. And working competencies would be ideation or invention and discernment. But something to engage in this kind of work, as important as it is, and something that we want to engage in to really turn the tide, it was going to take someone who had a stronger gift than I did in regards to discernment and building out something, and someone who had the time to do it. And I had neither of those things. And all the while, I'm trying to cast vision and wonder for Wellspring, and knowing that this is something that was going to be absolutely vital in 10 years. That if we don't get ahead of this, like this is bad. This is going to be really, really bad. No good.
There's a cliff.
And we're planning funerals, planning sermon series. Like there's just all the things that are pressing in, and also the stuff that, when we're thinking about a year vision or 3-year vision, that includes the entire organization. But we didn't have enough to like be able to put this as our 3-year vision. We just we didn't know what we didn't know. And so like to lead people into a place that we don't know would be bad leadership. And so I needed somebody who could build something out, identify clearly the need, put together the scaffolding so that people could envision it, and a person that had a gift of discernment and a gift of time that I just did not have.
Yeah.
So to be able to have a fractional leader in that position was tremendously helpful. Yeah.
So when you think about sort of those early innings, you've identified the need. Jeff sort of raised his hand and said, hey, I think I can help out in this way. What did that process of getting him on board look like? How did that first period of time, what did it look like? Were there really any differences for you, Billy, in terms of you've now said, hey, Jeff, let's go do this. Let's go do this project. We've got this clear need. What was that process of like getting him up to speed like? And then I guess maybe the second piece of that is, how quickly did you ultimately really start to feel like the relief from this problem that had been mounting for you?
Well, I felt the relief right away, because I knew somebody was going to be doing it, which was huge for me. And how the process really began was him just asking a lot of questions, which actually I didn't know it at the time. But after we heard the results, was wildly important, is to have like a third party come in and ask a lot of questions. Because if I was asking the questions, then people would have the pressure to kind of bias their answers. And that's not what we needed in order to identify the real issue. So what Jeff did is he came in, he interviewed some previous interns, some young leaders that we had at the church, some current pastors that we have within our orbit, interviewed probably about 30 or 40 people in different spheres, and basically under those legs. And the information that he found was incredibly valuable, because they were able to be open and honest in a way that they maybe wouldn't with me, or with somebody like that was directly connected into the organization. But seeing someone who was tasked with a particular outcome, they felt privileged and gave permission to be able just to speak frankly. And it was out of those conversations that there were some key pain points that surfaced. Interns are wondering and wandering. They just need time to discern because they're in that space of like, I'm not sure if this is the thing that I'm called into. I need a place where I can gain experience. I need mentors. I need a place where I can grow emotionally and relationally, in maturity in such a way that I'm equipped to then become a pastor. Looking for a career path was another thing. So all of those findings bubbled up as a result of his work. And then at that point, once we knew exactly what we needed to hire for or engage in, then it gave us a lot more confidence to move forward.
Yeah, that's great. That third voice or that non-anchored voice, I think is something I've heard quite a bit, right? Just in terms of giving people the ability to have the freedom. But I also found it's also true on the other side, which is interesting too, right? Because when I'm coming in, what I find is there's also that freedom on the other side to sort of have equally transparent conversation back because of that relationship. And it's not that same sort of full time, I have to be biased in how I deliver this to Billy. There's sort of that objectivity that comes from that relationship. I'm curious. That's one of the ways that you would describe your relationship with Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like he's curating a counseling relationship between the mediator between the
Yeah.
two, which puts him in a unique and privileged position to be able to get raw DNA from this side, get raw DNA from this side, and then be able to process it in a way that's healthy and whole. It's a
Yeah.
gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift. Yeah.
Fast forwarding to the present day, let's talk about what the impact over the last 3 years, what does that look like for you? What results or shifts have you seen as a result of sort of entering into this sort of relationship?
Yeah, well, the impact on the church, it's, we can give quantitative data of, and that's valuable. I mean, we have like 8 interns that we started out with the first year, which is just staggering. And now we have 5 apprentices. And basically, like the first year's internship, second year's apprentices, third year's residency. So we're not we have the residency built out, but we're not there yet in terms of the people. But in interns and apprentices, we have proof of concept. So the quantitative measurements are helpful and it's up and to the right. But the qualitative data, I think, is for us is even more powerful. Our internship and apprenticeship, what we call the 3SI, Three Streams Institute, is now the lifeblood of Wellspring. I mean, our church really can't imagine us in existence without SI. And even training our current pastors. It's been interesting to see as the current pastors are training the future pastors. The future pastors are actually encouraging the existing pastors. It's retraining our mindset to say, hey, when I do a visit to the hospital, I'm not going to just go alone. I'm going to bring someone else. And as the intern goes into that space, they're going to have all sorts of questions, which daylights like why do I do that?
Yeah.
Or why did I say that?
Yeah.
So the learning is cross-pollinating. It's like it's going between both entities, which is super encouraging. So it's not just one group that's growing. It's like the entire culture is growing as a result, because now there's like this attitude of constant learning. We're always going to be engaged in learning from one another. And like on Sunday morning when we have things happening, when there's a gap, the interns and the apprentices know that they're going to be called on, that they need to step in and step up. Now, there's some things that we're not going to ask them to do, like preach, ad lib on Sunday morning, but we are going to be able to throw them into particular situations that maybe they're a little bit uncomfortable, but it's going to stretch them. And that has a way of like impacting the culture for the good.
Mhm.
And when our older congregation sees a bunch of young people that are, it revitalizes. There's a sense of revitalization that's taking place within the church, which is super encouraging.
Yeah, that's awesome. Maybe looking back, one last time here from the present perspective, sort of if Billy today could go back to Billy 3 years ago, what do you wish you would have known before sort of engaging Jeff in terms of the relationship and that fractional leadership role that you engaged him in?
I think what I wish I would have known is, well, I don't know if I would have done anything different.
That's awesome.
I'm trying to think of something that I could say
Yeah.
that profound, but there's not a there. Like I wouldn't have done anything different. And My hopes for what's happened and the product that we've seen is man, I wouldn't do anything different. And in fact, I was sharing with our leaders within our denomination the importance of fractional leadership and to consider when there's a gap or there's a need somewhere to not just go to what we used to do in years past, just to hire somebody, whether part-time or full-time, but to consider a fractional leader. I think reflecting back a little bit on this past season, I would say the leadership principle that is, what Jim Collins would talk about, firing bullets before the cannonballs. Get the right trajectory, get a sense of the direction that we're going, and pour the appropriate resources for where we're at as an organization into that solution without over managing or over investing until we absolutely know exactly what we're doing and exactly what we're going for. Then you can pour, a ton of resources into it. And I felt like with fractional leadership is that it allowed us to step into it in a way that just didn't give a nod, but actually made an intentional move. This is an issue. We're going to identify the issue. We're going to identify the problem, and we're going to move in this direction. But do so in such a way that doesn't have to bring on a full-time employee where now we're assuming benefits and it better work out.
Yep.
In the next 3 to 5 years, I could see us hiring a full-time person, but it'll be a very specific job description with a very specific outcome. And that's what fractional leadership has given us the gift of.
So in those 3 years, I'm assuming the partnership with Jeff has also sort of evolved a little bit over the course of time. How has that relationship evolved, whether either in terms of areas that you've asked Jeff to enter into and participate in terms of how his role has changed? It could just be relationally from a leadership perspective, how him integrating in has changed. What are some of those key changes that you have seen?
Yeah, with the specific work of creating the Three Streams Institute, I think that's just continued to double down on what the initial intention was. But what has shifted or what has changed is as we're working through getting clarity on, accountability charts, getting clear on how we're running meetings, just recognizing what Jeff does and the gift that he is and the skill set that he possesses, that when we have a need outside of the Three Streams Institute, so for example, within our executive team, there's 2 or 3 things that we've asked him to enter into, to be a part of, to help us get clarity on our accountability chart, on our particular 90-day rocks and our 1-year plan, which has been super helpful. But I wouldn't have had that framework to even consider that if I hadn't have had the experience with YOKE and fractional leadership on the Three Streams Institute side.
So final question, if you had any advice to give any other leader from an organization who's maybe on the fence of trying to figure out, do I shoot that bullet or am I shooting the cannonball? What option is this from a fractional leadership perspective? What is this thing that Yoke's talking about from a co-builder's perspective? What's the advice that you would give them or that you feel like would be most helpful for them as they sort of are working through that process?
If someone's on the fence, then I would say that that's the discernment to go into fractional leadership. Because if you're on the fence, it's risky to go to one side or the other. And so if we don't have to make a decision now, then don't make the decision now. And the worst thing that we could do is to make a decision and then we're having to reel back, a year, 3 years later. And we're not just reeling back or trying to restart. We're actually having to recover and to restore. And it's just bifurcating energy. So if we don't have to make a full-time decision now, don't. Let's get really clear. And if we're on the fence, hire for a fractional leader over the course of 6 months, 1 year. And then in 1 year, you'll know some things that we don't know now that'll give us greater confidence to make a decision for the future.
Yeah, I like that. It's sort of a framework that I've heard in the past is sort of making those little bets, finding those things that we can make the little bets on that make sense for us without having to bet the farm.
That's right. Well said.
Awesome. This has been awesome, Billy. I really appreciate your time. Thanks again for being open about your journey and really appreciate you being willing to share it with us. So thank you.
Absolutely, Josh. Thanks for inviting me on.